We are ready to go. Uh, okay, so again, welcome everyone to the meeting. It's nice to have all of you here. And so my name is Dennis. I'm from the College Admissions Experts. And we're going to talk about a lot of different things today. So first, we're going to start off with some college admission strategies. We're going to talk about how to write phenomenal essays. And then we're going to talk about the beginning and the end of the essays. And you'll know what I mean once we get there. We're going to go through some examples. We're going to cover some additional essay information. And then finally tell you a little bit more about my company. And then at the very end, we'll have time for Q&A. So my background, so I'm in New York City. So if anyone happens to be in the area, I'd be more than happy to grab a coffee. So I graduated from MIT as well as Columbia University Graduate School of Business. I have admissions experience from MIT, and I've written 2 books on the subject of essays. One is for high school students applying to college, and the other one is for college students and professionals that are applying to grad school. So part 1, college admissions strategies. So what I would, well, before we get into like the specifics of how to write an essay and everything, I wanted to go over just a little bit so you get an idea of what it's like from the admissions office. So during admissions season, they read thousands of applications all day long. And after a while, the stories start to blend together and they start to repeat. So that's why it's so very important to stand out. So just as an example, let's say a school has a 5% acceptance rate, which is, they're picking 1 out of 20 students. So let's say the first 10 aren't quite as strong as the other 10. So they get denied right away. So then you have 10 students left. And of those, again, they're going to pick ones that have, like absolutely great test scores, great academics, fantastic extracurriculars. So again, that narrows it down to 5. And let's say they narrow it down, they weed out 2, and so you're down to 3. So you're at 3 out of 20. And those 3 are just phenomenal candidates. So how are you going to, what's going to set you apart? And much of that really comes down to the essays, because at that point, everyone's going to have, pretty similar, going to be very, very impressive in every way. But at that point, how you convey yourself to admissions, what you say about your background, and just how you connect with them is going to be extremely important. So mindset is very important in the admissions process. So colleges are looking for students who are going to be successful not only on campus, but also after they graduate. So they're looking for individuals who are going to make a difference in the world. So when you're filling out your application and writing your essays, you absolutely don't want to be modest. This is not the time to be modest, but you don't want to be arrogant either. So you want to strike the right balance, something in between, but definitely on the confident side. And make sure to maintain like a winning mindset throughout the entire admissions process. Come across as you're this phenomenal candidate, and in everything that you do. The essays, the application, the activities list, you want to have that mindset that I'm going to win, I'm going to get accepted, and that's going to really shine through in everything that you do. Marketing campaign. So many students understandably haven't had experience with marketing, at this point in their lives, at least marketing themselves. But the college application process and the essays, it's all about marketing, selling yourself to admissions officers, and convincing them, why you're so wonderful and why you should be accepted. For example, for the essays, it's so you're no longer writing a high school assignment, but you are, writing an admissions essay. So the difference is, so you can have a different audience. So the person evaluating what you wrote is no longer a teacher, but an admissions officer somewhere far away that you don't know. And the goal is, instead of getting an A on your paper, the goal is now, the writing has to be impeccable, but the goal is for them to read through it and come away with like, wow, this student was amazing. We've got to admit this this person. So very, very different mindset, very different way of approaching the writing. Um, okay, so part two, how to write phenomenal essays. Um, so the essays are going to be a very important part of your application. They've always been fairly important, but after COVID, they've actually gained much more importance because many schools are test optional, and so they put much more weight on them, and that's continued to be the case. So admissions, they're going to know all about you from the rest of the application. Your transcript, your grades, letters of recommendation, extracurriculars. So the essays are a chance to show them something new about you. Okay, so what admissions is looking for in the essays? A lot of different things, but some of the key things are depth of thought, maturity, growth, insights, and just unique perspectives. So the essay, it's not a resume or a list of accomplishments. It's more of a story, a narrative. You want to show admissions, who you are, what makes you special and unique. And the person, show them the person behind, all the rest of the data on your application. And your ultimate goal for the essays, and really everything that you do in the application, is to convince them to accept you. I mean, that's the bottom line. You want to write, great essays and have interesting storylines and, share, very fascinating things about you. But everything you do at the end of the line, you should look it over and say, is this going to help me get accepted? All right, that's the question you should be asking for everything. So the first essay you're going to write is the Common App essays. There are a few schools that aren't on the Common App system, most notably MIT, like a few other ones, and the University of California, they're on their own system, so they're not on the Common App either. But 95% of the schools are. So here's the prompts. There's 7 prompts, and just very briefly, one's asks about your background. Another is lessons from obstacles. One was talk about a challenge that you faced, something that someone has done for you, something that sparked a period of personal growth, something that you find a concept or idea that's very engaging. And then number 7 is any topic of your choice. So which one should I pick? The particular essay or the particular prompt that you pick really doesn't matter. It's all different ways to get you thinking about a storyline. So if one of the 6 prompts, really resonates with you, by all means, go with that one. But otherwise, prompt 7 is always a good option because it's, very open-ended, allows you to say, to write any story that you like. So that's the pro of it. One of the cons is that, since it is just completely open-ended, you want to make sure that, what you write, stays on point and doesn't meander. But if you can do that, I think prompt 7 is generally a very good option. And I would say about at least 85% of my students go with that one. Again, it allows you to say, anything that you want. Right. Okay, next slide. Ready? I apologize, I'm frozen. Okay, I'm back. Okay, so selecting a topic. Don't rush the process. Spend plenty of time brainstorming, coming up with ideas. And also, when you're picking a topic, keep in mind that the essay is not an autobiography. It's more of like a snippet of your life. I'm sure most of the students out there, they've have such amazing backgrounds. They could probably write like an entire book on what they've done. But the essay, you have to figure out what's something that's most important, and what do you really want to highlight. So also you want to focus on what would be effective and impactful. What part of your life would fit that criteria? So selecting a topic, part 2. So I have actually 3 slides on selecting a topic, so you can probably gather that this is very important. So think about what makes you unique as a person, what differentiates you from your peers, what's important to you in your life, what are your passions, and what do you want admissions to know about you? And
I
you,
have a question.
yes,
So I've started a project recently sharing opportunities online because I had difficulty finding them myself in the past, but I'm also a competitive swimmer. Which topic would be better to write about?
I'm sorry, you cut off a little bit. So you're a competitive swimmer, and what was the other one?
Yeah. I recently
It's all right, Dennis. I think you can keep on going. We'll take Q&As at the end, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, yeah, definitely we'll have Q&A at the end, and we'll have plenty of time to go over any questions that you may have. So, selecting a topic part 3. So you can either write about something that is not anywhere else in the application, in which case, you would show an entirely different side of you, or different aspect of what you're all about. Or you can write about something that is elsewhere, but really expand on it and put it in the context and just go into a lot more detail. So, for example, if there's something in your activities list that is really central to what you're all about, you can certainly write about that. Um, and then you don't need to have extraordinary experiences in order to have an extraordinary essay. Like, for example, if you have, a life or death experience, I mean, that's definitely could make for a very engaging essay, but, if you write about it in a very dry way, it's not going to be that effective. Whereas, if you're walking through Costco, and this is actually reference to the Costco essay, which is one of the viral essays that have come out a few years ago. So basically, the Costco essay, the student is just walking through a Costco and making observations on different things in the store. But um, I mean, these are very insightful, and like she might have, they remind her of different parts of her life and what she's done. And so in the end, it's a very engaging essay. Again, even though it's potentially about something like a mundane topic, but there's a lot of insights and a lot of very um, insightful information that she shares about herself and her background. So therefore, it's not as much as what you're writing about as it is how you write about it, like what you have to say about it. One other thing that I want to mention is stick to the high school years. If you've won the spelling bee in 8th grade, that's great. They really don't want to know about it. They really want to know about more recent years. If there is something especially noteworthy that happened before high school, it's fine to mention it, but just a brief mention. You don't want to spend too much time elaborating on it because, once again, they really want to know about what you've done in high school. So once you've picked a topic, the next step is put together an outline. And once you're done with the outline, you don't have to, when you're writing, you don't have to, let's say, write every point by point, but rather use it as a roadmap. So if there are certain points that, as you're writing, don't make sense anymore, you definitely skip it. If there are things that you forgot to put in the outline that belong, definitely, put that in there. And oftentimes just the process of writing will spark new ideas and new thoughts. Also, keep in mind that the first draft is not the final draft. Focus on content first, and then perfecting the writing comes later. And then also don't mind the word count for now. So the Common Up essay, the maximum word count is 650 words, but when you're writing, just say everything you have to say. And you can always condense it down and distill it later to its best parts. And keep in mind, this is not like I mentioned earlier. This is not an academic assignment. The tone of the essay has to be much more personable, and you want to write in a way that connects with the reader. So the final draft. So once you've gone through some iterations and you're at the final draft, at this point you want to make sure the writing is impeccable. Sentence structure, grammar, vocabulary, everything has to be perfect. I also recommend reading it out loud because it's by hearing the words out loud, it helps to uncover little errors that might be in there. Because up until this point, you've just been working on your computer in silence. So just hearing the words sometimes makes a really big difference. And another thing I would recommend is once you're done, just take a few days away from it. Because at that point, you're going to have the whole essay pretty much memorized. So take away a few days to kind of forget about it and then just read it again from a fresh perspective and just do like any additional polish that might be needed. Okay, so part 3, the beginning and the end of essays. All right, so this is a chance for everyone to show off their literary skills. So this is the beginning of a book. Actually, let me bring up the chat. So if you know what book it is, just put it in the chat. Actually, my chat's not coming up, so I'll have to defer to you, Saga. Has anyone guessed it right?
Not.
Not yet?
Uh,
Okay, it's Herman Melville, Moby Dick. Right, and here's the beginning of another book. First line, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Any guesses? No? Okay. So
Any.
this is Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. So why did I pick those lines? They're very memorable. Sometimes the first thing that you think of when you think of those books is the opening line because it's so powerful. So similarly with the essays that you're writing, the opening has to be very well thought out, and it should be like a sentence or two. Again, it shouldn't be like a full paragraph, but just like maybe one sentence or 2 or 3, and you want to grab their attention, pull them in right from the start. So they're thinking, wow, that's interesting. I wonder what else they have to say. I wonder where this is going to lead to. And also the opening is going to create a setting for things to come. So, so definitely make sure to spend enough time on the opening. Okay, so next we are going to talk about the closing. So, okay, my chat just came up here. Okay, so does anyone know what book this is the last sentence of? This might be a little tough. He was soon borne away by the waves and lost in darkness and distance. So very, very powerful line. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And we've got one more closing. This one might be a little more obscure, perhaps. So we'll take in a quick bite at the restaurant at the end of the universe. Any guesses? All right, so this is Douglas Adams' The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So the closing. As important as I was saying the opening is, the closing is almost even possibly more important because this is the last thing they're going to remember, the last thing they'll come away with. And again, you want the goal of the essay to be like, wow, that was amazing. We have to admit this student. So as much time as you spend, from the beginning or the middle parts of the essay, spend extra time on the opening and closing. You want to make those absolutely perfect. Okay, so I have a few examples. And so here's one, and I'm gonna just try to skim through the parts that are in red. Okay, so again, this has a very powerful opening line. So once I found out that the results of the AMC exam were available, I confidently strutted over to visit my math teacher to find out just how well I did. After hearing my score, I was absolutely devastated. So I was just saying earlier about how you want to portray yourself in the best possible light, and but so why is this an effective beginning to an essay? Because it's he basically did very poorly on the exam. Well, the rest of the essay, so we kind of see how he grew and matured and changed as a result of this kind of quote failure. So he says, despite the setback, this pivotal event ended up profoundly changing my entire outlook on what education means to me. And then he continues in the third paragraph, I became obsessed with more thoroughly grasping everything I was learning. And then later on, he says, I became much more intellectually curious, wanting to go beyond the surface. And then it was pushing me to explore everything in a way I had never done before, including my music. And then I just started to pay heightened attention to details by craftily refining my technique. All right. And then he continues about music. I was able to bring out the full richness of the piece and make the performance all the more memorable. So, and then towards the end, he says, he had a renewed passion, and he now manifests his true potential in all that I do. And then the closing, again, very powerful closing. Someday I'll go back to my math teacher and tell him that what he actually gave me that day was not a test score, but something much more profound, a moment of awakening that would lay a new path for my entire future. So, as the result of a failure, the student grew, matured, and became a better person. Also, he was able to highlight his strengths in science and music. So, very, very powerful essay. Next example. Okay, so this one is a very different type of story. So the opening, when I first stepped into my local thrift store out of sheer curiosity and found a perfectly good pair of jeans for only $1.50, I knew I was onto something. So then he talks about how he bought a lot of clothing and he sold it on eBay. And then encouraged by this success, he started, listing other items that he found at the thrift store. And then he talks about how he was not only making profit, but he was advancing the mission of empowering individuals with disabilities, since that's where the profits from the store went to. So, and then he talks about, and then he started repairing and reselling devices, and this was a way to manifest his love for STEM. So he was combining his business skills with his technical knowledge. And then he says, so my thrifting adventure sensitized me to the financial struggle of some segments of our society who cannot afford new clothing. And so he ended up giving profits to support the local homeless shelter. And the way he ends the essay is, and to think, all of this stemmed from a modest $1.50 pair of jeans. So just to recap, from a random event, the students started a small business, which was initially to make money, but then it turned out to be so much more in terms of benefiting society. So very different from the first example we went through, but just as effective. Okay, third essay. So on this one, it's a student who is very accomplished in piano. So she writes, my musical career began when I was 3 years old. And then she talks about her dedication and hard work resulted in many accolades. And she even performed at Carnegie Hall. And then she talks about performing as a volunteer at a local senior center and how she found a woman and her eyes were filled with tears just from the power of her performance. And then she says, at that moment, I realized my music had the power to touch hearts. Through music, we all speak with each other and are able to make emotional connections with one another. So sharing my love of music with others brings me joy, but so does being able to pass down my talent to young generations. And then she talks a little bit about the teaching she does with students. And then the closing. So despite all the awards and honors, the most important moment in my music career took place at an unassuming senior center. So again, to recap, an ambitious, very accomplished musician found that connecting with others was far more important than winning awards. Okay, one more example. Okay, so this one, it starts out, so sitting alone in room 806, I impatiently tapped my foot as I waited for the other Model United Nations club members to arrive for our weekly meeting. No one came, and I spent my lunch watching the lonely clock tick away. So He then continues that, a few members just occasionally showed up. It was very frustrating, and it was almost like he was on a ship with no captain. But then eventually, he was bombarded with questions from his friends saying, why are you in a club, in such a club with, really no direction? And he says, well, I have a vision for what the club could be. And then he was finally elected club president. And at this point, he could finally accomplish what I had envisioned. So I started to put in the intensive effort needed to turn the club around. And he talks about all the different things he did.
It's 7:15.
Sorry about that. Clock telling me the time. Um, so, and then he says, if I had not been true to myself and my principles, I would have missed out on the wonderful opportunities and the welcoming community that MUN now has to offer. So I learned to be unwavering in my pursuit of what I believed in. And then the closing, 4 years ago, I entered room 806 all by myself to the sound of nothing more than the ticking clock. But now the passage of time is blurred by the beautiful buzz of energy and the excitement that fills the room. So through perseverance, determination, and leadership, the student was finally successful in bringing a club to life. Takeaway, 4 very different essays, very different stories, but each one demonstrated something very special and unique about the student. So whatever your story is, don't try to emulate someone else's story. You have something that's very unique about yourself, and just write your own story. Okay, part 5. Here's some additional information pertaining to the essays. One is feedback. So I definitely encourage getting feedback, although you'll probably receive conflicting advice. So you're gonna have to use your judgment about what's helpful and what's not. And just keep in mind, it's your essay, and it's the final decision is yours to make. I want to touch on supplemental essays because the more selective a college you apply to, the more likely they'll have a supplemental essay. And once you apply to the top tier colleges, they're going to have several supplementals. So make sure to create a timeline because there's a lot of writing that you're going to have to do. And make sure that the supplemental essays don't have any repetition of content with the Common App essay. So the full set of essays, the Common App and the supplementals, they should be part of like a coherent, consistent whole. And beware of cut and paste, because some schools might have a prompt that's somewhat similar to another school, but they're rarely identical. So you can reuse something that you wrote previously, but make sure it's not a 100% cut and paste. And I mentioned the University of California, so they're not on the Common App system. And I just want to mention them here because I'm sure some of you might be applying there. So they have 8 prompts, and from those you pick 4, and they're each 350-word essays. And in contrast to the Common App essay, these are more like the supplemental essays in terms of asking something that's a little more specific. So they're not quite as, I guess, difficult as the Common App essay. So they ask about, number 1, leadership, a creative side, talent or skill, educational opportunity, a challenge you faced, academic subject that inspires you, what you've done to make your school or community a better place. And then the last one, what you believe makes you just stand out as a candidate. So whenever you answer these prompts, in addition to answering what they want to, in addition to answering the prompt itself, always go beyond that and give them something more. Like for instance, the one about leadership, describe an example of your leadership. So you definitely want to do that. But then at the end, instead of just leaving it with that, talk about what you learned about leadership, how you benefited from it, how it made you a better person, how you can use the skills that you developed in the future. So for each of these, always add, a little bit at the end just to, make your essay stand out that much more. So some questions that I'm asked often is, should I discuss mental illness and mental health issues? So this one's a little tricky, and it kind of depends. You don't want to convey yourself as someone who is, overly troubled and just, overcome with mental illness. But, if it is something that you've encountered in the past, make sure to write about it in, I guess, in a way that doesn't distress the user, or I'm sorry, distress the reader. And also make sure it's something that you've overcome, and just talk about other things you've kind of bigger and better things you've gone on to afterwards. But this is kind of a very, very difficult topic to answer. Another question that I hear probably more than anything else. So what can I do if my life is boring? So if you think your life is boring, send me an email. I'll show you that it's not. Should I make use of humor? Humor in writing is very difficult. If you can pull it off, absolutely, you can put that in there. Nothing wrong with using humor, but make sure everyone that reads your essay, really agrees that it is something that is, really hits the mark. To what extent should I talk about my family and others in my life? I've read a lot of essays where they'll talk about their grandfather and how the wonderful life he had and all the lessons they learned from him. And it's perfectly fine to mention family members or friends or other people in your life in the essays, but the essay should ultimately be about you. They're not trying to admit your grandfather, they're trying to admit you. So you can definitely mention some takeaways that you got from relationships, but again, really focus on yourself. I also want to touch on the internet and AI. So if you go to Google, you'll find like the top 10 rules for writing an essay, topics to absolutely avoid in your essay. And there's all sorts of things that you'll come across, and take everything with a grain of salt, because there's a lot of bad content out there. There is some reasonable content, but definitely there's a lot that sometimes it's just plain wrong. So keep that in mind. Regarding sample essays, it's perfectly fine to read sample essays, but use it only to spark ideas, not to emulate. Because remember, your story is very unique, and it's not going to map to something else that you read. So use it more just to spark some ideas. And the last thing I mentioned is, so no AI, which refers to ChatGPT. The first year ChatGPT came out, the colleges didn't really know quite what to make of it. But then the second year, they realized that, it's not the students writing, and, they, anyway, now basically, if they find out, your whole application is going to be rejected. So definitely you don't want to take that chance. And I can usually tell within 2 or 3 sentences if an essay is written by AI. And if I can, certainly admissions officers can. Okay, and next slide. Let's see, we're a little frozen here at the moment. So while I'm waiting for, once again, my computer to unfreeze, maybe we can take a few questions. So, and then we'll kind of jump in and finish the slides. So, any questions?
Yes. So sorry, my internet disconnected before, but I was talking about how I'm a competitive swimmer, but also recently I started a project sharing opportunities online. Which one of these topics would be better to write about?
Okay, and you said you started a project sharing opportunities online?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So in the past, I had difficulty finding opportunities. So over like the past 2.5 years, I've gained experience and then found it much easier. So decided to start sharing with other people the opportunities I found online.
Okay. Well, I think probably sorry, I'm still trying to figure out, like, so you found opportunities online, and what kind of opportunities?
Things like internships, or work or job opportunities, scholarships, fellowships, summits, specifically for teenagers, because I thought that teenagers were more vulnerable to not finding opportunities because of their young age.
And have you participated in these opportunities?
There's always like a link in each post where they can like register and apply
Okay,
for each opportunity.
okay. Well, I mean, you can certainly combine things, like, if your entire essay was on competitive swimming, um, I don't know, that's quite, I mean, 650 words just to talk about that single topic seems like it would be a bit of a stretch. Although maybe you can interweave, things about, competitive swimming and how it connects to other areas of your life. Um, for instance, like the discipline, the tenacity, the hard work, that comes from being a competitive swimmer. Um, you can talk about how maybe there are other areas in your life in which that made an impact. And so, but in terms of, does that answer your question? Because I'm sorry, I'm still not sure when you said I found opportunities online.
I
Like, did you participate in these opportunities?
I think maybe if the student wants to connect later, Dennis, that could be a good opportunity for you guys to discuss this one-on-one.
Okay.
But maybe just for the interest of time, since we only have about 4 minutes left,
Ooh,
maybe
okay,
we can see if there are any other questions.
sure. Just in like 2 minutes, if I have time to do part 6, Sadia?
Sure, absolutely. I just
Okay,
don't know if folks will be able to stay on longer, but if anyone wants to be here and is able to be here, then absolutely we can stay longer.
okay. And I'll show my email address later, so if you have any questions that we don't have time for, we can definitely cover it. So just very briefly about the college admissions experts. So we've been in business for 14 years, one of the top ranked admissions firms in the country. We've worked with over 15,000 students from around the world over that time. Many of our students go on to top tier colleges, and the increase that we provided for admissions is about 3.5. So for example, if you're on the UPenn, acceptance rate is 5.4, but most of our students average 18.9%, which is a 3.5 boost. We have a lot of press coverage. We were recently in the New York Times last year, which is something I'm very proud of. And we have a lot of accreditations. We have a very strong team. Everyone graduated from top tier colleges. And finally, just how we help our students. We have one-on-one personalized service. And I guess in the interest of time, I'll just skip to the next slide. So we have a free consultation, and we also offer a discount of 15% to all the webinar attendees through the middle of the month. Our website is right there, and you can email me directly on either of those two emails. And finally, on TikTok,
I'm sorry, everybody. Looks like we lost Dennis again. I apologize, but I know it's time and maybe there's going to be an additional wait until the technical difficulty. Oh, there we go.
do we have time for Q&A?
Sure, we can do about 5 minutes or so.
Okay. Okay. Yes, who has a good question for us?
Could you repeat what you said about my question? I disconnected, unfortunately. My apologies.
Okay. Any other questions? Either on admissions or essays or anything else? Something that I covered that needed explanation, or just something else that's on your mind?
Please feel free to
oh,
type your question or come off mute. Yep.
I was gonna ask, when you said like the first 10 or so would be like rejected when you're explaining the 5% analogy, what like led to those being rejected? Like I I know that there's like kind of like a standard for like minimum GPA and things like that, but what really like is that about?
Yeah, either their grades weren't strong enough, or maybe the extracurriculars were a little bit weak. Just like that set wasn't as strong as the other candidates. So basically, if you rank the 20 candidates, 10 the bottom, the 10 that aren't as strong, they're going to be rejected. So,
Okay, thank you.
any other questions?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat what you said about my question? My internet disconnected, unfortunately. My apologies.
Okay. So what was your question?
My question was, the competitive swimming one and my project of sharing opportunities online.
All right. Why don't you email me and we can maybe pick it up offline, because I apologize. I'm having a hard time grasping the question. So I apologize, but definitely shoot me an email and we can pick it up online. But just in
Sure,
general,
but
when you write about something, it doesn't have to be all about one particular topic. So like swimming, I think might be a little bit of a stretch for the entire essay. So you probably want to touch on some other areas as well.
okay. Oh, can I get your email? Where can I get?
Sure, it's right on the screen on the slide. And otherwise
Oh,
you can reply. I'm sure the link for the webinar has emails on it. Or you can reply to Sadia, and I'm sure
okay.
she can forward it to me.
We will send out a follow-up tomorrow morning with the recording as well as Dennis's email.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? None? All right. Well, once again, I apologize for my delay in getting things started. So once this is over, I'm going to take a sledgehammer on my computer. Just, but again, thank you all for joining, and I hope it was helpful to you. And again, any other questions or comments, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much, Dennis. We really appreciate your willingness to do this tonight and share this valuable information with our students and their parents who are here today. I definitely recommend for everyone here to reach out to Dennis. He's given a very generous free consultation and a discount to all the webinar attendees. We will send out his email as a follow-up, as well as a recording of this webinar. So without further, keeping you on, I know it is already over time. Thank you all so much, and definitely reach out to Dennis. Thank you so much, Dennis, and let's do this again.
Yes, my pleasure.
Thank you.